the opposite story with China. The president-elect has promised a hard line there. I want to bring back Congressman Seth Moulton and Congressman Adam Kinzinger with us. So, Congressman Kinzinger, to you, do you believe that this capture of the underwater drone is, I mean, what do you make of this in terms of Chinese relations with the U.S. as we have an incoming president?
Yeah, it's obviously a violation of the principle of freedom of navigation of the seas. That's what we fought our first two wars over, is that idea, whether it's the Barbary pirates or anybody else. So this violates the fact that we have made that a staple of who we are in terms of international trade, in terms of the freedom to navigate, and in terms of military. So I think this needs to be pushed back against hard. Now, this is not necessarily an act of war, but I think this is China's attempt to try to, again, reassert itself, which it's been doing, frankly, over the last couple of decades, and especially over the last few years. And I'm actually excited about incoming President-elect Trump's ability and desire to push back against the encroachment on the South China Sea and against economic infractions and things like that. So I think it'll be an exciting few years.
But Congressman Moulton, clearly China doesn't think that this was just some little drone bobbing along. They feel that there were monitoring purposes for this.
Look, I think there's bipartisan agreement that we need to push back against China. President Obama talked about a strategic shift to the Pacific. Now, that's not because he wanted to send the U.S. Navy on vacation. That's because we have to confront the threat China poses in the South China Sea. The reality is that what we're seeing over the last few days is, I think, a frightening lack of leadership from the president-elect. At first, he says that we've got to get the drone back. Then he says, I don't care. I mean, look, I'm not a president-elect, but I was a lieutenant. I had a platoon in the Marines. If I was taking my Marines on a mission to get a drone back, and then a day later, halfway through the mission, I said, oh, no, we don't care. They can just have it. That's not leadership. So we've got to have some serious leadership and some strategic thinking from the White House, not just these sort of one-off tweets and phone calls that, frankly, are very confusing to the troops.
Yeah, we have one of those tweets. It says, we should tell China that we don't want the drone they stole back. Let them keep it. I mean, Congressman Kinzinger, when you see this back and forth, and I suppose we may be expecting this as Donald Trump moves into the White House, is that helpful?
No, I don't think so. I think Twitter can play a very important role in this kind of new era. You look, there are prime ministers and presidents that use it to get information out. I think where the president-elect, if I was advising him, I'd say that you need to be very careful is when you write the tweet personally without the understanding of necessarily that message that sends, it may not be helpful. So, I wouldn't necessarily discourage him to close down his Twitter, but I would definitely probably encourage him to run these tweets through different national security experts. But again, he's still president-elect. I think, when it comes to January 20th, he's sworn into office, or 21st, and then he can make the decision. I think at that point we can be way more critical if, in fact, these kinds of tweets continue as president of the United States and not just incoming.
Are you expecting a change, Congressman Kinzinger? You're expecting some sort of adjustment of Donald Trump and the way he tweets and how it can affect national security?
I think I am, and the reason is because when the weight of the presidency comes on top of your shoulders, things change. And you've seen from, him saying initially he's not even going to divest himself of his business to now putting out ways he's going to divest himself and put that barrier down. As time has gone on through this transition process, I think you have him coming to conclusions that some things have to be done differently. So, look, I will support the president-elect in every way that I possibly can, and I'll oppose him when I must in areas. And hopefully when he's sworn in, this Twitter can still be used very effectively, has a lot of followers. But I think, leaving the emotional tweets out of it may be a good step in the right direction.
Congressman Moulton, what do you think about this new Secretary of the Army designate, Vincent Viola? You're a veteran, as is Congressman Kinzinger. What can you tell us?
I don't know him, but he's a veteran as well. He went to West Point. He has an impressive career in business. But I'll tell you, I think that if you look at the Trump cabinet so far, it's 90% millionaires and billionaires. I think we've got that demographic
and generals.
covered.
There's a lot of generals, too.
There's a lot of generals. I value the input of generals, but you can't have a cabinet that all looks the same. That's almost all white, that's almost all men, and his 90% millionaires and billionaires. I mean, this is a president-elect who said he was looking out for the little guy, who said that he wanted those perspectives, that he was listening to the American people. Well, if you look at who he's going to surround himself with in this administration, he's certainly not listening to the vast majority of Americans.
What do you think, Congressman Kinzinger? So much advice that the president-elect is going to be getting from people with military backgrounds. Do you think that's going to be an issue, and also speak to this appointment?
I think it's going to be a great thing. I mean, you know, look, we've got people, like in the case of General Mattis, for instance, he's actually been out of the military for 3 years. The good thing about military people like Seth and I in Congress, for instance, is we know where for lack of a better term, the skeletons are buried, for instance, in the Pentagon. We know where there's inefficiencies. We know where there's things that need fixed. General Mattis will do a great job of that. So bringing this military experience in, I think, is going to be good. And with the new Army Secretary, I don't know a lot about him, but I actually do know somebody that has worked with him before and knows him well, and said probably among the best pick you could have possibly made. So he may be worth a lot of money. That shows he's successful, and I think he's going to do a great job for the Army.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Congressman Kinzinger, Congressman Moulton, thank you for being on so we could have this bipartisan discussion. I do appreciate it.